Coming up on Backchecking the Bolts.
Braden Point, 50-goal scorer, a couple 40-goal seasons. He had a bad season this past year. I think he would probably even say that as well. You're trading a guy at his lowest possible value. Braden Point is a good player who just happened to have a year full of injuries, bad luck, bad play. He just never found his game after that injury. I think you said it was in Philadelphia.
Yeah,
the one
the big
where
streak,
he got the ankle injury, correct?
Yeah, he got folded up underneath him. I honestly don't think he was ever 100% healthy coming back, even with the Olympic break. I mean, he just didn't move the same. He didn't have that same net front presence.
Welcome to Backchecking the Bolts. Backchecking the Bolts is your cup of coffee to get you the latest on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Join host Jason Linkus and the managing editor of Raw Charge, Justin Godfrey, as they break down the Lightning's most recent games and go beyond the highlights, telling you what the box scores didn't. It's time to drop the puck.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Backchecking the Bolts. It's June the 12th. Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Finals has concluded. Carolina with a 3-2 lead. They head back to Vegas with a chance to claim their second Stanley Cup in franchise history. And as always, I am joined by Justin Godfrey of Raw Charge. You can reach him each and every day at www.rawcharge.com. Justin, there's a lot going on in hockey right now, but first I want to get your thoughts on the Stanley Cup Finals. Do you think Vegas had their chance in Game 4 going into that third period? They owned the second period, and they just could not put Carolina away. Was that their chance?
Looking back, probably at this point, now you got Carolina with, basically, 2 shots to finish this thing off. I got all the momentum going. They got the one goaltender who seems halfway competent at his job right now. My money's going on Carolina right now. But it's been a fun series. I mean, I think after Game 3, weren't people writing off Carolina? So it's one of these kind of series that can flip based on, the day of the game, how that particular game goes. If Vegas comes out at home and blows Carolina off the map and, Busey gives up 5 goals, then everyone's talking about, hey, it's it's Vegas going to go ahead and take the crown. So yeah, it's kind of fun when the goaltenders aren't that great. So it makes for exciting hockey.
Well, you and I talked. You actually asked the question to me, how many goaltenders will we see in the Cup Finals? You said 3.5, over or under, and I said over. We're almost there.
Exactly.
Carter Hart just needs to implode.
Come on. I mean, I think any other coach, maybe he's already pulled. I mean, he's said, hey, he's a historic goaltender, not in a great way. I mean, first goaltender to give up 4+ goals in 5 straight games in the Stanley Cup Finals. So, I mean, the man's making history, but Torts is kind of being a little stubborn, and, good for him for showing faith in his number one goaltender. I don't know if it's the right thing to be doing right now. He thought maybe just give the guy a breather after, Game 5, let Aiden Hill play a little bit, get some ice time on there, and just let Hart kind of clear his mind out. But Torts he's committed to Carter Hart, and he's going to go as far as he can with him right now, to possibly Las Vegas's detriment.
Justin, we talked yesterday, and we were texting back and forth about the Conn Smythe Trophy odds. And then this morning, before yesterday's game, Jordan Staal was about 8-1. Now he is the favorite right now in the betting odds to win the Conn Smythe Trophy. He has 8 goals, 6 in the final series. But the first 3 series, he had 2 goals.
Yeah.
Are we basing this just a little bit too much on his performance in the finals? Yes, Carolina wasn't tested in the first 3 rounds, and Jordan Staal has been phenomenal in the finals. But this is the MVP for the playoffs, not the MVP for the finals.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit, especially with Carolina, is that there hadn't been anybody that really put themselves head and shoulders above anybody else on the team. So a strong series in the final could, be the difference as far as winning the trophy. One thing I think maybe we were looking a little bit, maybe too much on offense. I mean, Jordan Staal's been really good as far as shutting down some of the opposition. I think he was matched up against that Suzuki line against Montreal for a lot, so I think he helped shut them down. He's played pretty well defensively, even in if he hadn't been scoring the first 3 rounds. And now that he's putting the offense up, I think it really is a no-brainer. I think he is, Carolina's best player in this final, and I think that's going to make a difference. You talk about it, yesterday morning was 8-1. I mean, I looked, what was it, 2 days ago? He wasn't even on the board for the Hard Rock app. I mean, you couldn't even place a bet on him winning the Conn Smythe. We talked about it today. He was, I think, plus 100 or something like that. So he's really come out of nowhere. I still think if Vegas wins, it's going to be, Mitch Marner, who's, had a solid series as well. He's kept doing what he's needed to do, but they're going to need him down the stretch, over these next 2 or 3 games or however long it goes. They're going to need Mitch Marner to start scoring. They're going to need Eichel to start putting the puck in the net. He's, again, added some assists, but he's still got that big goose egg next to his name as far as goals.
Well, today we're going to talk about the NHL awards. 3 members of the Tampa Bay Lightning won league-wide awards. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about some of the upcoming NHL free agents. Michael McCarron is off the board. With the lack of depth at the center position with free agents, I'm going to ask Justin about Nick Paul. Is it time for the Bolts to move the big 6'4" center? Also, Dylan Larkin is out there. He put his trade request in to Steve Yzerman at Detroit. Initially, he gave them 3 teams. Now he gave them 6. Yzerman said, hey, I need some more teams to try to leverage and try to get something for you, and Tampa is one of those. We're going to talk about the possible fit with Dylan Larkin in Tampa. So, Justin, let's start with the NHL awards. John Cooper, in a little bit of a controversial vote. And I'm not saying that he didn't deserve it, but there's a lot of people out there that felt Lindy Ruff should have won it from Buffalo for the turnaround that the Sabres did. And I have to admit, I was one. As much as you have to give Cooper credit for dealing with the amount of injuries that he had and getting Tampa in second place in that division, Lindy Ruff, if you replay this season 5 times, I don't know if Buffalo makes the playoffs in any of those replays.
Yeah, and they definitely don't win the division. It's one of those, awards are what they are. I think sometimes it's more fun to talk about the people who didn't win it as far as, those who did. We've had over a decade of talking about Cooper not having a Jack Adams, right? And it's always been the story. This guy's going to go into the Hall of Fame, and he's never been the coach of the year. Well, that storyline's gone now. He's got his award. And I do think, honestly, some of his past played into it in the minds of some of the voters. Like you mentioned, the job he did with the injuries. The fact that they had 3 to 4 Syracuse level defensemen in their lineup for long stretches of time is just, it's a really good job of coaching. So yeah, should Ruff have won it? Probably, if all things were fair, but you never know how these voters are going to go. They start splitting the ballot out and start giving some pity votes to other people, and all of a sudden the points add up the way they add up. And Cooper gets his award. So should he have won it? Probably for the 18-19 season. I think that's the one where we look back as Lightning fans and say, how did this guy not win that year? And that's what Buffalo fans are going to do this year with Ruff is, they're going to look at this for 3-4 years and be like, why didn't this guy win back in 25-26? So Ruff will get his. If he duplicates it again, he'll be fine. It's just, it's fun talk when there's no hockey being played.
Andrei Vasilevsky won the Vezina for the league's top goaltender. Ilya Sorokin from the Islanders was second. Jeremy Swayman surprisingly got a couple first-place votes. I didn't really understand that one. He finished in third. But the other really tight vote, and it came down to 10 points, was for the Hart Trophy, the league MVP. Nikita Kucherov edged out Connor McDavid by those 10 points. Justin, we thought that with Edmonton getting on a roll and Kucherov missing a few games down the stretch, we thought that was going to derail Kucherov's attempt for that second Hart Trophy, but he ended up winning. A little bit surprised?
Yeah, a little bit. And again, MVP, the last, I'd say 3 or 4 years, I have absolutely no problem with who's won them. You've just had, for the most part, 3 really good players, and it's been Kucherov, McKinnon, and McDavid every year. I mean, it's hard to argue cases against any of the 3. I think McKinnon kind of fell off a little bit this year, not that much. Celebrini got a lot of the press. And if San Jose had made the playoffs, we've talked about this at length. If San Jose makes the playoffs, he probably wins, to tell you the truth. But I also think that maybe there was a little faction that kind of put their votes, had their minds made up, by the Olympic break that, Kucherov was going to be the MVP this year and didn't really think about things down the stretch, or kind of justified reasons why he struggled a little bit as McDavid overtook him. But that being said, again, I'm glad Kucherov got it. It would have been weird, 20 years down the road to think that with the career he put up, he was only MVP once. McDavid's going to win his fourth sooner or later. It's just going to happen. The guy's too good. He's still too young. So it's nice to see Kucherov get it. It's kind of funny that they were at the stadium and he's the only guy there. He's at the rink, right where they knew he was going to be. And, he got the award. So I think it's well deserved. He had a great year. He carried the team for long stretches of the time. And when you look at, the points he put up when they won compared to the points he put up, I think he was less than a point a game player in their losses that he played in, whereas he was over 2 points a game in the games they won. So, that's a pretty big difference. And that's kind of the heart of being an MVP, right? If you shut down Nikita Kucherov and you win, there you go. So glad to see him win. The Vasilevsky one, I think, is your no-brainer. I think he was the best goaltender in the league this year over the course of the entire season. Good to see him win. I don't think there's much argument out of anybody for that one. I know some of the Washington fans were talking about, their netminders who had really good seasons, but Washington kind of underachieved. So probably why they didn't get the press that or the votes that they needed.
Vasilevsky, I still think, can win more Vezinas down the road, I should say, because there's a lot more teams going to goaltending tandems as opposed to having one guy, sort of the same way in the NFL with running backs. You see more teams having running back tandems. In the NHL, you see a lot more teams willing to split the net 40 games instead of letting that one guy go 65. The Lightning don't really have another goaltender in their organization. Yeah. It's going to be Vasilevsky. As long as he's healthy, he's going to play a lot of games. I could see him being a contender for the Vezina for the next 2 or 3 years, if not more. But Justin, let's take a look at the other award winners. The Lady Byng was Cole Caulfield, the Masterson, Gabriel Landeskog, the Calder, Matthew Schaefer of the Islanders, Nick Suzuki won the Selke, Zach Werenski won the Norris Trophy. The Lady Byng. Did I mention the Lady Byng? Cole Caulfield?
Yeah, Caulfield, yeah.
Okay, so I did mention that one. Mm-hmm. Justin, the way they're doing it now is they just sort of give out the awards almost impromptu. Matthew Schaefer got his award on a talk show. Do we miss a little bit having the NHL award ceremony?
I don't think so. I don't think the players necessarily enjoyed it that much. I mean, if you're a Lightning fan, Nikita Kucherov. Like, I don't know the guy. I never talked to him about it. But my assumption is he absolutely despised the award show. He did not look like he was having a good time out there. And that's a bad look for the league, honestly. And I just think it's one of those things where you got so much other stuff going on in the NHL. It's in that area where the Stanley Cup is just over. You got the draft, and then you got free agency. Putting on a show that didn't get really great ratings. I mean, your casual sports fan is not tuning into the NHL award show. They're just not. So I kind of like the way they do it. I didn't really care for Vasilevsky's trophy reveal. This day and age, let's face it, he's not a native of the U.S. and getting the police involved with suspicious items in his car. A little tone deaf, in my opinion. Some of the other ones have been really nice, backyard barbecues, things like that. Surprises. I thought the one they did with Kucherov, when he won with Lindsay last year, was really nice. If you can get the teammates involved, if you can friends and family involved, I think it's a little more personal to the players, and that's the edge the NHL is trying to go for. I do think it brings some creativity into it, makes it a little different. Plus, it gives them a news story, throughout these 2 weeks of the Stanley Cup. It gives them something else to talk about as opposed to putting it all on one night. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
Justin, let's talk about the what ifs of the Lightning season. What if something happened? So in your mind, I sent you the question that I was going to ask you earlier today. But Justin, what is Tampa's what if this season? If this happened, the season would have been different.
Yeah, I know when we talked about it earlier, I had a couple. The Game 5 one kind of sticks in your head as the most recent. What if the Lightning don't lay an egg in Game 5 against the Canadians? They probably win that series and move on. But the one that I keep coming back to is what if they had been able to finish above Buffalo? And then I boil that down to March 8th, Sunday. I believe it's Sunday. I don't know.
It was
March
a
8th.
Sunday.
Yes. So Lightning in Buffalo. It was that wild game. They ended up losing 8-7, right? They had a lead late in the game. Not only did they lose 8-7, they lost 8-7 in regulation. If you flip that game, there's the 4 points the Lightning needed to take first place in the division. If everything else plays out the same as it does from that point on, the Lightning end up with 108 points. Buffalo ends up with 107, right? Lightning win the division. Lightning then get the matchup against Boston, which is a much better matchup, in my opinion, for them. I think they beat Boston in the first round. They get over that mental hump of, hey, we've lost in the first round the last 3 years. They advance in the second round. Buffalo and Montreal probably beat each other up like they did in the second round this year. The Lightning get to pick on, that team. I think they match up better against Carolina in the Eastern Conference Final, and I think they match up really well against what we're seeing out of, Vegas. So I think it's a completely different story. That one game, and it's a game in March, right? You're not really thinking too much about it. You're looking forward to the playoffs. It was a fun game as a fan to watch, the penalties, the goals, everything that happened. But in the end, it's kind of one of those games that if it goes another way and the Lightning end up winning that division, and of course we can go back over 82 games, you can point at 3 or 4 other games that they probably should have won where they could have got those points. But, another aspect of that game is that it was one of those games where they tried to be really physical with Buffalo and kind of bully them around a little bit, and it didn't work, right? Buffalo kept coming back. They made them pay on the power play when the Lightning took the extra penalty. So, as much as it would have been good for the Lightning to win, Buffalo learned a lot about themselves in that game, right? They learned that they could stand up to the quote unquote bullies of the Eastern Conference and come out victorious. So I think that's a big turning point. That's probably my 2025, 26 what if moment. What if the Lightning had held on to that lead and won that game?
Justin, I want to talk to you about the person who was in the net that day. It was Jonas Johansson. It wasn't Andre Vasilevsky. They were coming off. That was the second leg of a back-to-back. Now, we had talked many times in the podcast that John Cooper always wants to win that first game. He had Vasilevsky playing, and I forget who that was against. It might have been against Columbus, but it was against an opponent that the Lightning should handle relatively easily. Buffalo got a lot of momentum from that game.
Yeah.
They all of a sudden were believers. Do you think it's time for Cooper to say, hey, I know my philosophy on the back-to-backs, but when you have a game of that magnitude coming up, it's worth it either to play Vasilevsky in both or to save him for the better opponent?
Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to see him play Vasilevsky in back games unless it's absolutely necessary, if there's an injury or something like that. It's something they learned with Vass's workload. When he went through those back problems, they think he was doing just a little bit too much. And Vasilevsky's one of these guys who's never going to say no. In fact, he's going to be mad that he doesn't play 82 games a year. As far as your point in regards to better understanding the matchups, I could see that. I know they plan these things out pretty well in advance as far as the schedules for the goaltenders. So I think sometimes they could probably tweak it a little bit more, maybe flip a start here and there, like you said, and then go for the better matchups. Over the course of 82 games, you hope that it doesn't come back to play. This just happens to be one of the times we pointed out. It's part of the problem, the Lightning not having a truly good, backup, not having that, tandem situation that you talked about. Johansson does what they need him to do. He keeps them in the games. It's not always pretty. It's never going to be low scoring. I mean, always bet the over if Jonas Johansson's in the net. That's my my betting. The Lightning it's going to be the same thing this year. But Bass is going to get his 60 games in no matter what. And then 2 or 3 here and there. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. You got the extra 2 games next year, but you also don't have any of these long breaks, right? You don't have Olympics to worry about or a Four Nations tournament to worry about. It's going to be, I think the schedule's not going to be quite as condensed as we've seen it at points. So I'm sure once it's released, Cooper's going to take a look at it with Vasi, with Francine, the goaltending coach, and map out a strategy. And maybe they will take competition into play now if you're going down the stretch against a division rival, maybe he gets more starts against them than he does against a non-divisional rival. But yeah, no matter how long you're in this game, you keep learning, and that's what Cooper does really well.
When is the schedule going to get released?
It's usually
It's
like
normally
July
middle of July, right?
Yeah, after once free agency dies down a little bit, you get like the opening night schedule, and then they kind of dole it out from there. So yeah, we'll know by July, maybe a little bit earlier this year because the season does start, I think, a week earlier. So we'll see how it goes.
Justin, let's talk about some of the free agents, especially at the center position. Michael McCarron re-signed with Minnesota, 6 years, $20 million, $3.3 million cap hit for a guy who's never had more than 22 points. He's good in the faceoff dot, won 52% of his draws. I thought that was a little rich. Minnesota is all in. They want to win the cup. But I'll have to say this, Michael McCarron, nice player, but for a guy who is only going to get you fourth line minutes, that's a pretty high price tag. And did he just set the bar for guys like Boone Jenner and Eric Halla for what they're going to get plus in the free agent market?
I think so. I mean, if you look at it, if the cap keeps doing what the cap's going to do, and it's expected to go up. It's 114 million next year. I think it's supposed to be like 123 the year after that is what they're planning on, based on the financial numbers. 3 million, was it 3.3 a year or something like that? I think I referred to it as.
But it's 6 years. It's 6 years for a guy who's going to be 36 at the end of the contract.
So he plays 3 years, and then you buy him out for $1.5 million for the rest, for 6 years.
But you can only buy out so many guys.
So you trade him to somebody else to buy him out. It doesn't matter. I called it the Yanni Gord deal. It's the same thing with Gord. I don't think Gord's going to see the end of his contract with the Lightning. I don't think McCarron's going to see the end of his contract with the Wild, but he's going to play a role for him over the next 2 or 3 years. And you got him at, honestly, 3.3. This is not bad for a depth center. I mean, it's not what Charlie Coyle signed. I mean, what was he? Close to 6 or something like that. I'd rather have McCarron at 3.3 than Coyle at 6 over 6 years. But it is kind of setting that market a little bit. It's probably pricing the Lightning out of some of these guys. But we'll take a look, kind of down the road, what else they can do. But yeah, I don't mind it. Like, I thought he was going to be about 4 years closer to 6 million. I thought he was going to be kind of close to what Coyle signed for. He's got that big body. He wins faceoffs. I think on the right team, he's going to be a little more offensive than he was with Nashville and even down the stretch with Minnesota. Now that he's kind of comfortable in his role, I think he's going to put up a few more points. He's not going to be a 60-point guy or a 40-point guy or anything like that. But if he gets between 25 and 30 points, killing penalties, roughing people up, playing that physical game, I think it's going to be well worth it.
If he does, that's going to be a career high.
Yeah, good for him. Yeah.
It can happen, but I'm just saying you're investing in a guy who's had a long NHL career that has never been that guy.
Right.
You're basically saying that we've uncovered something in him that's going to allow him to become that player. But Justin, and when it comes to centers, Tampa has an interesting piece that could be very valuable in the trade market, and that's Nick Paul. Prior to this year, he had 2 20-plus goal seasons, 40-plus point seasons. This past season was, I don't want to say it was a disaster, but it wasn't good. 8 goals, 7 assists, 15 points. With the lack of centers out there, and Evgeny Malkin re-signed with the Penguins, we talked about McCarron. It's basically Boone Jenner, Jason Dickinson, Eric Halla, Kevin Stundland from Utah. There's not a whole lot else out there. Nick Paul could demand something in the trade market, and for the Lightning, this would allow them to be younger on their bottom 6.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at it, like you said, he's going to have some value. I think it's going to take a while. It's going to be after teams figure out what to do with, Dylan Larkin, Vincent Trocheck still on the trade market. Once those kind of bigger names, higher point producer guys get off the market, the teams that miss out or the teams that are still looking for that kind of middle 6 depth, Nick Paul's going to be an asset for a team if he goes somewhere. He's a Swiss Army knife kind of player. He could play up and down the lineup. He can play center. He can play wing. He's a big guy. He does pretty good along the boards, kind of in the dirty areas. I know he gets some flack for not being more physical because he is 6'4", but there are just players tall players who aren't physical players. It's just not their game. It's not Victor Hedman's game, right? He's not going to go around throwing Kevin Stevens like hits. It's just not how he plays. They use their reach and their size for different, different aspects of the game. Nick Paul's reach is extraordinary. He looks like a freaking pterodactyl out there sometimes. He can stand 4 feet wider than that and still deflect the puck home, right? Or if you're reaching for a puck along the corners, he can kind of reach around the defender and poke it free. So there are aspects to his size that are really valuable to teams where he doesn't have to go knock over 35 players a game to make an impact. I think injuries, I think he never really found his groove this year. He started the season off, he got hurt throughout the season, missed a game in the Montreal series, and then never really had a defined role. I think one of the things with the emergence of that Yanni Gourde line is it pushed Paul down to the fourth line, and they're still trying to kind of figure out what the formula was on that fourth line and never really found it with Paul. I think he's a guy who can give you 15 minutes a night. He's going to be that third line center on a good team. And I think there's going to be some demand for him. And like if the Lightning do need to free up some cap, say they go after and they make the Dylan Larkin trade and need to build some room for next year when they re-sign Kucherov, he's a good aspect. He's got that cap hit that's kind of affordable for some players. If he gets back to that 20-point plateau, 20-goal plateau, that's a key asset for a lot of teams, especially rebuilding teams. A team like Chicago could use him. San Jose could use him down the middle of the ice. Even New York, like if the Rangers move on from Trocheck, they get a little weak down the middle. He'd be a nice fit in there for him, and also a trade chip down the road if it doesn't work out there. So there is some innate value in him. And when you look up and down the Lightning roster, as far as players they may move and that they can replace, I think Paul's name really stands out. We've talked about it before. Dominic James is kind of a similar player. He does it a different way, right? He's more speed and getting the puck into the zone, but he can fill that third line center. He's got to work on his faceoffs a little bit and start winning some more of those. But he's also a young player, and that tends to come with age. So the big drawback for me right now, as far as trading Paul, is you don't have that faceoff specialist to replace him, and that's something the Lightning struggled with last year. They struggled with it in the playoffs. They lost a lot of key faceoffs against Montreal. And I think, it's Julian's Brisebois, so he's got plans A through, double Z for you Canadians out there, as far as, what's going to happen. So he's got a plan if he does trade Nick Paul, who he can bring in. You bring in Colton Sissons or somebody like that to win those draws. But it's a pretty bleak center free agent market. It's a bleak free agent market overall, honestly, with the way everybody signed. When you're talking Boone Jenner and Darren Radish, I love Darren Radish. He's done great. But if you're talking about him as your, number one free agent overall, pretty much everybody out there has a flaw, some sort of flaw. You're not getting a slam dunk, grade A free agent on the market this year. You're just not. And that gives some more value to Nick Paul if the Lightning do decide to trade him.
And it could increase the value for Dylan Larkin for Detroit. Now, Dylan Larkin has asked for a trade. Initially, he gave Steve Yzerman, the general manager, a 3-team list. That was Florida, Vegas, and Minnesota. Stevie Y said, hey, guys, I need a little bit more. I need some more options here. So he gave them Anaheim, Tampa, and the Islanders. I don't personally think it's a great fit for Tampa unless you play him on the wing. But, Justin, what's your initial thought, and what would make sense for Tampa to give up to get a guy like Dylan Larkin?
Yeah, a lot of it's going to depend on what Yzerman's looking for, right? I don't think he survives another rebuild. And that kind of plays to the Lightning's favor, because I don't think he's going out looking for San Jose's number 2 overall pick. I don't think he's looking for a first-round pick and a young, prospect who's still playing in junior somewhere. I think he wants an NHL-ready talent. I think he wants somebody who can help him. So when we wrote about this, we kind of explored it in 2 different kind of ways. One is the 1-for-1 deal, and we mentioned Braden Point. Of course, there's a lot of things you got to work around to make that happen as far as no trade.
Point has to waive a no trade clause.
Exactly. And I think that was the big, we had talked about it. We had chatted about it. The big drawback of that is what's the incentive for Point to go to Detroit, right? We could see why Larkin would want to go to Tampa. We could see why Tampa would want Larkin. We could see why Yzerman would want to trade for Braden Point, right? I mean, he traded up for him to get him in the draft. But the sticky widget, as the Brits like to say, is why does Point want to waive his no trade? And it was more philosophical than actual professional that you come up with. Hey, maybe he wants to step out of the shadow of the Steven Stamkos and the Nikita Kucherov that he's played under, for his entire career. Maybe he wants to be the guy. Doesn't seem to be his personality from what we've seen over him, but that could be a deciding factor. Brees Wall could be like, look, I'm going to release you I'm going to waive you if I don't, or something like that, the Ryan McDonough deal. But I think that's kind of the sticky widget there. And then the other way to look at it is prospects like a Connor Geeky, Gage Gonsalves, somebody like that. These guys have shown that they can play at the NHL. They haven't quite succeeded yet, right? But if you could get, Connor Geeky, maybe an Eric Chernak to help their defense as well. Now you're looking at Yzerman being able to trade his captain, but not fall off the cliff. Detroit, yes, they faded this year, but they've kind of been in the hunt the last couple of years. I don't think he wants to take a tremendous step back in dealing his captain. He's pulled off deals like this in the past. Lightning fans will remember Marty St. Louis demanding a trade and pretty much saying, I want to go to New York. And Yzerman pulled off a pretty good haul for that. So he's done this in the past. Jonathan Drouin didn't want to play for the Lightning, and he turned it into Mikhail Sergachev. So Yzerman has a history of being able to make this work, and I think he does come up with something for Larkin. Does it involve the Lightning? We'll see. Does it fix any immediate needs for the Lightning? I don't think so. In a non-salary cap world, I think this is sure, bring in Dylan Larkin. We'll figure it out later, right? But in a salary cap world, and when you have some veterans on the team, where does Dylan Larkin fit? Who do you displace if you do get him on the roster and Point's still on your team? Do you move Anthony Cirelli down to the third line center? Be a great third line center, but are you then getting the most out of Anthony Cirelli if you cut his minutes to 10 to 12 minutes a game? Do you move Larkin out to the wing? I think that's probably what you would see happen if this deal happens. It'll be Cirelli, Larkin, and Brandon Hagel with Larkin jumping in to take some faceoffs. But yeah, I think it kind of creates more problems than it solves in a way, which is odd to say about a 30-goal, 60-point guy. But it would be fun, but I don't really see it happening.
The one thing I would caution about trading Braden Point, 50-goal scorer, a couple 40-goal seasons. He had a bad season this past year. I think he would probably even say that as well. You're trading a guy at his lowest possible value. Exactly. Braden Point is a good player who just happened to have a year full of injuries, bad luck, bad play. He just never found his game after that injury. I think you said it was in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
The one where he got the ankle injury, correct?
Yeah, he got folded up underneath him. I honestly don't think he was ever 100% healthy coming back, even with the Olympic break. He just didn't move the same. He didn't have that same net front presence. But yeah, you're right. Do you trade the guy at his lowest point? The other side of that coin is it a one-off year or is it the beginning of the decline, right?
You're right.
I don't think Point plays a type of game that's going to age very well in the NHL. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He relies a lot on speed now. As these injuries kind of start mounting up, it's really going to affect his game. He is still one of the smartest players out there. No lie about that. He knows how to get in front of the net. And he talked about it, in his exit interview. He needs to get his shot back to what it was. He never felt comfortable with his shot this year. He saw it. He took it from farther away. It wasn't on target as much. It was blocked a lot more than we've seen in the past. So he wasn't getting it off as quick. So he's kind of my most intriguing player for next year. Does he bounce back? Is he back to the 40-goal Braden Point? Or is, like I said, this the beginning of the end? And that's why guys like Brees Wall get paid the big monies. You have to make that decision. To go over to the football world, Bill Belichick was always famous of, I want to cut a guy or trade a guy a year before his decline as opposed to a year after his decline, right? And that's kind of where Point could be right now with Brees Wall. Brees Wall could be like, hey, he still has this track history. I can still sell other teams on this was just an aberration, and still get pretty good value. I think, you got 30 teams out there that would probably trade for Braden Point in a heartbeat. So if you can work out a deal, I think it's there to be had. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe you talk to Minnesota. If you are set on trading Braden Point and you've made something,
they need a center.
They need a center. I think they were the ones that wanted to draft him. That's why the Lightning traded up to pass them in the draft. And I think he'd be a good fit there with the talent around him. I mean, imagine going from Kucherov to Kaprizov. I mean, And then you got Quinn Hughes feeding you pucks from down low. I mean, you want somebody to waive a no trade clause or a no movement clause. I mean, Minnesota is a pretty good destination to think about. So, a lot of intrigue going on. I think it's going to be a fun summer for the Lightning and a lot of possibilities, especially when you write about a team and you can kind of, play these things out. It's good for us. So we're going to have fun with it and see where it goes.
Well, Justin, I was just going to ask you what's going on at Raw Charge. You got the NHL draft coming up. Free agency starts on July 1st. And, of course, the conclusion of the Stanley Cup Finals. What do you have going on at Raw Charge?
Yeah, pretty much. We talked about the Dylan Larkin trade. We also talked about Alexander Tuch, an intriguing player in Buffalo. I think we had talked about him all the way back in 2025 as a potential trade deadline pickup for the Lightning. And now it looks like there was always the assumption, he's a Syracuse kid. He's upstate New York through and through, that they were always going to find a way to re-sign in Buffalo. But now, a lot of rumors. I think Pierre LeBrun was saying that they're going to go to free agency now, that they're not close on a deal. He's a very intriguing kind of ad for the Lightning. Can they get him under $10 million, which seems to be the sticking point in Buffalo, according to LeBron? But yeah, it's going to be interesting. We're going to talk about, we'll talk about some more free agents out there that may make some fits, some potential trades that could work out. Started doing a lot of research into the draft to see who the Lightning get with their, mid-50s pick. Yeah, there's a good chance they get a pretty good prospect out of this. So, or do they make any moves? We'll see. But we're going to focus on the draft and then move into free agency after that.
Justin, with the NHL draft, is this considered a strong class, weak class, middle class? What do the experts say?
I think, at the top of the list, Gavin McGenna, Ivor Sternberg are going to be your two top picks from the way it looks. It looks like a pretty solid, I'll probably call it a pretty solid draft. I don't think outside of those two guys, you're going to get too many spectacular players. I don't think your number 10 pick is going to be playing in the NHL next year. I don't think it's as strong as last year's draft was, but there are some intriguing names. I think there's going to be some talent there at 59. I think that's what the Lightning draft at. They kind of excel in that range too, because you get these guys that fall out of the first round for some reason and then start falling, and they pick them up. They did it a few years ago with Dylan Duke, who's, lit it up at Syracuse this year, and then Ethan Sesta last year, who just got traded in his junior league as I think Guelph. He picked him up as Guelph is it because they're hosting the Memorial Cup. I know you talked about that with the boys yesterday, last podcast. But when these teams host a Memorial Cup, they tend to load up, and Sesto went for a pretty big haul. You always got to love those junior trades with it. They're basically trading 12-year-olds now because, the draft picks are so far in the future. You get traded for, like the 20, 34 second round pick or something like that. So those trades are always fun to look at. But, the Lightning do a pretty good job of finding this talent in the middle rounds. I mean, if you go all the way back to Kucherov, one of the interesting stats about the Hart Trophy that I was looking at, in the past 20 years, how many players that were drafted outside of the top 3 picks of their draft do you think have won the Hart Trophy past 20
The
years?
Hart Trophy?
Yep.
Well, Taylor Hall was a high pick. I mean, I'm thinking of the obscure ones. My guess is, Kucherov was a second-round pick.
Mm-hmm. So he's one of your
My guess is it's probably just him.
There's one other player, and he was actually Nikita Kucherov's teammate this year.
That won the Hart.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a teammate.
Past 20 years. I think it just kind of slides into it.
Corey Perry?
You got it.
Wow.
And Kucherov is the first guy not drafted in the first round since the guy he lost to, Marty St. Louis. So the Lightning have a pretty good history of finding talent kind of outside the first round. And so I think they're going to do a good job this year as well. So there's your history, your Hart history notes for today.
Corey Perry's one of those guys you just don't think of as a former league MVP.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing against Corey Perry, but it's just not one of the guys that comes to mind real quick. That's why when I was going through that list internally, you think Taylor Hall, a guy who had sort of a one-off. Yeah. Where Taylor Hall's a nice player, but he had one season with New Jersey where he lit it up. And after that, he's never been anywhere near a league MVP caliber player.
Yep. That kind of shows you it's such a center heavy award. Those guys tend to get drafted in the top 3-4 selections. The fact that Connor McDavid's been winning them since he was in the league kind of cuts down on that number quite a bit. Same thing with like McKinnon, a lot of times. And that's, I mean, honestly, that's great for the league. I love it when the best players are the best players. You kind of had that run, especially if you're an Edmonton fan, where you had, Nail Yakupov and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. And, the Nuge is great, but he's not a first-round pick, right?
Taylor Hall.
Taylor Hall, exactly. Even Tyler Seguin. He went second that year. He's a good player, but is he not a superstar? Is he a generational player? And I think we've kind of seen that over the last few years. We're starting to get back into that with the NHL. Bedard had that great rookie season, kind of drifted off, but I thought he looked good last year. Macklin Celebrini looks like he's the real deal. So these are going to be the guys we're talking about for Harts down the road at some point. Once McDavid wins his cup and then disappears off into the Canadian wilderness to live by himself. But it's fun. It's a fun time in the leagues.
Well, you can catch Justin each and every day at www.rawcharge.com. We will be back next week. Looks like we're going to have a very special guest that we'll put out on social media once we get everything wrapped up. For Justin Godfrey, I'm Jason Linkus. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great day. Please hit that like and subscribe button and go Bolts.
Go Bolts.
Thank you for listening to Backchecking the Bolts. We are free and available on all platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, YouTube, and Deezer. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review. You can follow Justin on Blue Sky at rawcharge.com. You can follow the show on X at Tampa_Bolts_pod and on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Backchecking the Bolts. If you're interested in advertising on the show or partnering with us, you can find more information in the show notes or email Jason at backcheckingthebolts@yahoo.com.